Wouldn't lie to you fellas, this is whooping my butt. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Between the Sharks. Today, we've got some loose ends to tie up. If you've been following the channel, then you know I've been into the steering a couple times. We shortened the steering column. I had this set up in a way that was kind of connected, and apparently at some point along the way, I disconnected, and I don't recall when that was. Let's bang out a quick recap on the steering setup we got going in this jalopy to just get our bearings and bring you up to speed. If you're new here, welcome aboard. Hope you enjoy. Consider subscribing if you do. Anyway, we've got a 62 Impala steering column here that I shortened to fit sort of in the little Model T cowl. For steering boxes, I decided to buy a brand new Vega steering box. It's a cross steer setup, pretty common in the hot rod, street rod world. I did that for several reasons. All right, gang, I do know that in the hot rod world, it is cool / traditional or whatever to run an F1 box, but that is not a cross steer system, which is what I wanted based on the fenders that I have on this car. In addition, it's a better geometry system for steering. Sure, there are other cross steer boxes on the market, or you can find used ones at swap meets, like 4678 Ford boxes would work for all of this stuff, but at the end of the day, the Vega boxes that used to be hundreds of dollars to buy new are now kind of dirt cheap. I don't know what I paid for it, but I think it was well under 150 bucks. And I don't have to rebuild it, and I don't have to find a worm gear that's not all chewed up. So my decision on this vehicle, despite its outward appearance as a complete rattle can jalopy, there are a couple things that I am making a firm decision on here for my own safety because of the way I drive, and more importantly, the way people around me drive. With every car coming out with a touch screen and able to do 70 in a blink of an eye, I want to be able to steer this thing out of the way of the soccer moms trying to get to soccer practice, the teenagers who are texting, and Lord knows what else is out there. And I also want to be able to stop. So we got disc brakes on the front, and we are doing a brand new steering box so that we get responsive steering as best we possibly can. Now that said, it creates a system where we've got to add some universal joints to get from our steering box to our steering column. Kind of standard, it's been around a long time, but I've never done it, so we got to get it done. So this is going to turn out to be a 3-joint system in this particular setup. That's kind of common to get around headers and stuff like that. So we've got one universal joint at the steering box that gets us to a bit of steering shaft, a universal joint, and that's going to give us a bit of steering shaft that goes up to the end of our column there. Because of that, we need to put one of these dingle hoppers in line attached to the car so that this whole thing doesn't just, you know, roll around. As you guys may notice, I am using round steering shaft. Now this is indeed steering shaft that I purchased. I'm not sure, I'm sure it's hardened or there's some quality of it. There's spline stuff, there's double D stuff, and you need the joints to match. Our steering box is splined, so this is a splined joint to a 3/4 round joint. These are 3/4 round joints and 3/4 round joints. Now, the joints I have aren't really on the market anymore, but they've been on my shelf forever, so I'm gonna go ahead and use them. They are Borderson brand aluminum joints, so we won't be welding our steel shaft to our aluminum joints. We're gonna use grade 8 bolts. So for today's project, we've got to get our last length of steering rod fitted and drilled to accept the bolts to go through our universal joints. But most importantly, we need to figure out where exactly this thingamajigger needs to mount to hold everything in place. Essentially, it's got to go somewhere kind of like that. But a lot of people weld these things on. At least that's what I've seen on the internet and Motor Trend articles and that kind of thing. And I don't really like that because I don't know how you get this system apart. There's really not a lot of slop. You can slide this shaft, you can slide this U-joint onto the steering shaft coming out of the steering box a little bit, and you could maybe like pull the column out that way to get this loose here. While I don't expect to need a massive amount of serviceability here, I do need to be able to break this connection because I'm going to take the body off of here to do all of the final welding on the chassis stuff, run brake lines, run fuel lines, and all that stuff. And simply that step I want the steering column to go with the car, and I want the steering shafts to kind of just stay here or get put off to the side while the chassis and the body become separate entities once more. So essentially what we need to do requires 10 arms. It's a simple idea, but a difficult process because this needs to kind of be in place to make this an actual thing, but this needs to temporarily be in place until this is an actual thing, and then it's got to get bolted on and hold the system together. At least that's the best way I can figure. So it's going to be a bit of a dance. We're going to do things 28 times, and that's just gonna be life. I think I need some tape. Yeah, you'll do. Let's see if I can show you a thing or two. So, no! When you slide your steering shaft in, you want to make sure that it does not protrude out through here, because that'll actually limit to a varying degree how much this actually can rotate. So you need it to make sure that it's not quite sticking all the way through. Like, don't know if you can see it, but like make sure you got full motion out of the joint. For me, I'm gonna get it in there and then we're gonna wrap tape right yonder. I'll set it with a little bit of a recess. I mean, if you drill it out or do whatever, you can always go back in and file your end down if you find out that it is binding up your joint a little bit, but I'm gonna try to get it right the first time. Also wrapping this tape to keep it from sliding in further, so once we've got it set, we'll be kinda set, is what I'm saying. Oh, where's my knife when I need it? All right, here's the whole system out of the car. We've got a U-joint that's splined. That attaches to our splined input shaft on our steering box. We've got a shaft, a U-joint, that's just to bend us around this exhaust system, and then up to our steering column where we get one more U-joint. Now this thing is our contraption. It's just a rod end. It's 3/4 inch with a bearing that allows this shaft to slide through, and we'll fix this somewhere to the frame of the car so this whole thing doesn't just like wobble all over. That said, let's start putting her together and see if we can get everything lined up the way that we need it to be, steer the car, get it mocked up, in place, and build the bracket we need for this piece so that this steering system is functioning and disassemblable. Quick beat on U-joint phasing. So to phase your U-joints, you want the poodle snapper in one end to line up with the poodle snapper in the other. So basically this situation is in phase. This situation is out of phase. Rotate, back in phase. Exactly why? I don't know. I think it lubricates the wizardry involved in these systems. So I'm gonna slide this thing on. Right now, all I have is a rod end with a nut, spaced out by a shaft collar that I have through a piece of steel with a hole that's the right size for the bolt. It's my placeholder. If it becomes the real bracket, which I think it will, then we'll figure out how to bolt it onto the car, because I do want it removable and serviceable without cutting things apart. So it needs to go in here. So I've slapped this back together. It's all bolted now. I'm feeling like, because this is gonna need to land, I don't know, something like there, I don't know. My guts are to pull this off and go ahead and build an L-shaped bracket so that at some point we can bolt it on. I guess I could weld the bracket on if I feel confident that I can remove it or remove the rod end from the bracket to free everything up. But I've got a feeling it's gonna kind of all bind in there. So I'm gonna go and weld a section on so that we can at least get this clamped, and then we'll be able to test everything. Come here, little buddy. Hi-ya. I have seen on the interwebs a lot of folks just cut these off and then weld this directly to the frame. That seems quite unserviceable to me. Just got to wander over to the scrap chunks of metal area and find something suitable that does not take a lot of fabrication just to get this zapped together. Just grab this razzmatazz out of the rack. Look at that. It's right about the right size. So I'm gonna cut a section that's way too long. We're gonna tack weld that on there, and then we should be able to do what we need to do. Fellas, pretend that you don't want one. Like, that's, you know what I'm saying? Sure. Bang these pieces back together. I think the situation's gonna end up like that on the frame, probably. It's still a little warm. Here's an eagle eye view of the situation. I mean, basically, does that just push it out too much? Dang it, might. We're all up in the exhaust, which is where we don't want to be. And it's kind of, I mean, what we need back is the clearance that we lost by adding our bracketry. Poo. So I clamped everything up for demonstration purposes only, but it's worthwhile. If you're planning on a system like this, again, this stuff isn't uncommon, but it's a little bit persnickety because there's no room. That's why you're doing this in the first place. So this is connected. Right now, we're against this bolt and we're a little closer to this exhaust than I want. I've got this clamped on and that runs up to our steering column. But you can see that's a little bit, you know, it'd be nice to get this up a little higher if possible, but to do that, we need to come this way as much as we can. And the U-joint should solve all of the axis issues, especially with this rod end holding everything in place. But you do want some clearance here because this engine's gonna shake and you don't want it whanging on your steering. Even if it barely touches, it wouldn't hurt it, I guess, but it would be like tap, 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 and it'll drive somebody nuts. And I'll bet you'd feel it in the steering wheel. So we got to keep easing this bracket down to the bare minimum, it looks like, to get it as far over to the frame as we can, and then we'll jog it back up that way. Just for sport, here's the alternate version. You know, if we came up this way with the bracket, you can see we're getting higher. We're clear of this exhaust thing, but we would need this to come out to pull the exhaust off. So again, there's a lot of reasons, depending on how this is set up, that you want to disassemble it. We're still a little tight here, so that's not great. So I think that we still need to go lower and tighter, but at the same time, we need to be able to get that nut on. So if I weld this thing to this face right here, that's about all the space we can take up. Well, gang, you know it as well as I do. The grinder is the eraser to the hot rod world's pencil. Dang it. All right, 2.0. She's just getting uglier and uglier. Gang, she's a little better, but I don't think she's way better. I don't think she's way better enough is what I'm saying. This is the situation I'm worried about. If this thing's welded on, how does a guy get this whole contraption together without taking something even bigger apart, you know? So if this thing ends up somewhere over here, we're clear of our exhaust, barely, but we are. And then we're swinging back up, we're clear of this exhaust bolt, we make our connection, viola. So I'm gonna trim this off right here, and then we'll see if we can get this to land somewhere good. I don't know if I cut it enough. Well, fellas, the angle of the dangle, I think it'll work, but great googly moogly is it ugly. So again, I'm gonna make my sacrifices here a little bit. A lot of this is based on where I wanted the steering wheel for comfort of driving and all of that. So I'm kind of working around this whole setup. So I, as you may see behind me, have a wall of ram's horn headers. And I do like this driver's side ram's horn style because it's got the generator mounts, and I think that's neato burrito. But I also have a plethora of these. So I think I'm gonna swap this out really quick and just kind of see what I see if that helps our situation. Because basically the dump is different. So this goes straight down and kind of back, and this goes, and that, you know, we may be able to buy ourselves something here. Be back after these messages. Well, there's the situation with this set of ram's horns. Like the exhaust dumps straight down onto the steering shaft. You know, if you're mocking this stuff up, you're gonna wanna have your donut gasket, your collector, the whole situation, because it's gonna, I mean, you know, it might not be quite the way you think. The last version that I have on the shelves are weird smogger headers. They're kind of ugly. If you guys at home are like, you should just build a set of headers, you're not wrong. We could absolutely build ourselves a set of headers. Ram's horns though are my favorite look. So I spent most of the afternoon figuring out exactly what most of you probably saw in an instant. What I really need to do is go back to my original header plan. These U-joints only do 35 degrees maximum working. That's kind of gonna bind up. So as some of you viewers at home realized, I just need a double U-joint. So it's 2 U-joints together, doubles the working angle. Then I can run this down like so, up and around. The exhaust will clear just fine. You gotta give it the old college try. It's a Sunday, it's parts on hand. What am I gonna do, like magically conjure double U-joints? No, I'm not. I thought I could make this work. I gave it hell, gang. I gave it hell. I just, you know, didn't get her done. So we'll be ordering some U-joints and I'll see you in a jiff. Late night, gang, even got my ears lowered. So I got a package in the mail, which is great because I want to try out these things. And it suddenly occurred to me, my excitement on this kind of went, what if I cut up my steering rod in a way that doesn't work? So we're gonna dive in at least that far and see what these situations provide for our solvification. Viola, double the doohickeyage. Gang, that's not great. I don't have the patience for this tonight. I can tell you that right now, but I think this will ultimately solve my problem because it's gonna clear the exhaust over this away. This angle's not bad. This, I just need to find the right place for it. I feel like this wants to be shorter. This wants to be, I don't know, maybe a little longer. Maybe I will order some steering shaft. I don't know. Kind of meet here and gentlify the angle of that dangle, but I think it's ultimately what we need. And while all the joints don't look good, this is gonna allow it to tuck lower beneath the exhaust and kind of like hide out of the way, which that'll look better. Here we are, Saturday morning. Limited sleep, limited brain power, but gonna give it hell. So anytime you have more than one U-joint in your steering system, you need, this functions like a carrier bearing on a drive shaft, but it's basically just a 3/4 inch Heim joint. Right now, I made a bracket for it. It's just clamped on because I don't know if that's where it goes or not. But basically, that's kind of as good as it's gonna get. It's as close as I want to be to the exhaust, which will still be a pain to get off, but we can. And then we're going to try to go from there up to here and see what happens. So if you take a look-see at this here dingly-do, the maximum working angle on these is 35 degrees. Like you can see how it would bottom itself out, and as it tries to twist, just tear itself all up. These, I would assume, I don't know, something like double that because it's 2 of them. So if we just take this as a starting point, because that's exactly what it is, see if we can get our general fitment and routing kind of correct-ish. Yeah. So the rest thing I'm trying to do here is to get this shaft in the steering joint correctly. So if you look in right there, see how the steering shaft can go through? Well, that's an instant recipe for binding everything up. So what you want to do is actually be almost like that. There's a little bevel and you want to be behind that. I don't know if you can see it, but where that U-joint turns in, if your steering shaft is sticking through, you are greatly limiting the angle that your thing can dangle. So the thing is kind of jammed on. We got about 1/8 more that we could go in on this one, but we'll leave it there. All right, now we've just got to get from here to there, which I know sounds simple. Dudes, I had to use the old-fashioned just tape it on there method, but this is weirdly falling together with a piece of shaft that I already had. So in here you can see the biggest clearance issues that I've got going on here. It's making sure that this stud is clear so I can get this nut off. It's gonna be a pain, but it'll still work. And then we're clearing the back of the exhaust here. So, you know, to come out further, would require us to go up here and sort of decrease this whole angle, but then we're all into this flange. So what we're doing here is making sure that the center of this situation becomes the center here. And then that line can carry down to the center down. And that line can carry down to the center down here on the shaft. And then we'll be able to line those U-joints up and clock that all correctly. So, I really feel like that's kind of full length. Is it full length? Come here, little fella. Come here, little fella. Come here, little fella. Dang it, my dipstick is right in the way. Just as a reference here, gang, nothing's welded in. And I think I'm still gonna have to wrestle it apart pretty good. Gang, I really don't have a great method for just drilling this hole. It's round, it's awkward, there's not like a great clamping device to put it in a drill press or whatever. I could spend all day making a jig, so I'm just gonna do it. I feel like somebody at some point told me something about like a tool that I should get. If you guys have suggestions for stuff like this, put them in the comments, because, you know, don't need it often, but when you need it, you really, a pipe drillification machine would be good. Gang, I'm losing it. I was looking all over for a punch, and I got a bunch of them. I was like, man, I looked in my chisels and punches drawer, and I was like, there's no chisels or punches. And then I forgot I had a brand new chisels and punches drawer that has all my, you know, when you try to get organized, it can confuse you, fellas. One-handed karate, hi-ya! So now we've got our steering wheel straight. That's running this configuration. That's pretty, is it okay? It's pretty good. It's not perfect, whatever. Then we've got to get this one, which is not attached to anything right now, in phase with this one. So now that this has to come out again, I'll show you. A lot of people weld on the support brace, but I also think that's a bad idea. First of all, if you weld on your rod end heim joint situation, it's not a heim joint. If you weld on the rod end support, then when it fails or gets tired, or let's say you magically just don't get your hot rod thing perfectly right and it binds and prematurely like wears out, you don't want to be cutting that off and welding it back in, man. You want to be able to pull the nut off and take this thing, slide it out. Then if this isn't welded and it's bolted, you can slide this off, service the whole thing, and replace it. Just saying. Friends and countrymen, it's many hours later, not because I've just been working on this. A buddy of mine came by and needed help welding up some stuff on his truck hitch. That's solved, he's on his way. But gang, while I thought I understood this, apparently, you know, I didn't extrapolate far enough. And here's what we're back to. Once you add a third joint, you need a stabilizer. Otherwise, it's going to take the path of least resistance and flop around. Well, guy should have put it together that adding this is adding like 2 more joints, which really does need another stabilizer because it was kind of flopping around. So at this point, we're back, you know, to where we were. And I'm going to try to use parts on hand to get this done today, because this is Saturday 2 in a row, which is lovely to be out here in the garage. Not complaining about that, but gang, I'd like to get something the hell done. So I'm going to fight to adjust this bracket to make it as tight as possible to the exhaust. It's pretty darn close already. And then we're going to try to jam this thing in here, you know, get in there, get in there, get in there, and see if we can make it work. This angle just feels real steep to me, but I don't know what else to do except to try it. Move this bracket up just a fuzz. We're tighter than I want to be, but that may end up being where we're gonna be. So gonna do the process again, the same as what I did here. I just got to phase these two, and then drill some more holes. And then we'll get back with it and we'll see if it's good enough. And if it's good enough, then we gotta finish making this bracket still. Wouldn't lie to you, fellas, this is whooping my butt. I didn't think it would be easy. It's my first cross-sear setup on a hot rod. It's my first U-joint situation on a hot rod. But dang, guys, this is like Saturday number 2 in a row And we had some time into it, plenty of time into it before that. So we're on days now. Dudes, we got a thing. I've thought that before though, so let's not get too excited about it. Gang, just mere hours ago, I said something like, all we gotta do is install this, line it all up, and then adjust our bracketries. That wasn't true. I hope it's more true now. But here's a good look at the phasing, right? This is in line with this. This is in line with this. We're phased in, baby. Now, as you fellers have figured out, either by doing it yourself or watching the channel here, hot rodding is a lot about making parts that were not designed to fit together. Oh dear. Watch what I'm doing here, gang. All right. We're connected, but we're wiggly. Essentially, this is the deal. As soon as there's some resistance, everything just wants to go all crazy. Like, that's what's gonna happen, which is the point. Oh, come on. Seriously? Look at that. Please pause for swear words. Guys, I've dropped this bracket or this nut at least 5 times now. I think I may lose my mind on this one project. I haven't really wanted to burn this whole thing down that many times, but we're getting there today. Great googly moogly. Guys, I feel like that's actually kind of working. I don't know where it's gonna give out first, but I don't even remember what's tightened down either. Like, I don't. Let's raise the lift. Let's take a look, see what's going on in there, see if we can cinch this down, see what's missing. I don't remember about tie rods and pitman arms and what I did. Jeez. All right, gang, we got a handful of weak links. Our steering box mount is only tack welded, but we do have one big bolt going through the boxed frame. That's good. All right, so there's a groove on the splines of the input shaft on this, which I should have showed you, but I didn't, and I'm not taking it apart again. So that set screw's got to be in there. That can get tightened down. That's tight. We need to make some bolt holes here to bolt this thing on if it's happy. Got to tighten that bolt down. Guess I just have 4 clamps on the steering column right now. We've got some bolts up on the dashboard end, but I guess I haven't welded the final mount in, which also tracks. It's intense. Not like fun intense, but like, boy howdy. All right, gang, I may have just done the smartest thing that I've done in 2 weeks, which is I dropped the car onto jack stands, lifted the front tires off the ground, so now I can actually turn the steering wheel and just see if this thing even mechanisms correctly without, say, having the entire weight of the front of the car sitting on the tires that I'm trying to turn without moving, with a bunch of parts that are just barely cobbled together with clamps and tack welds. All right, let's see. Look at that. It's one extreme. How about this? Dang, gang. All right, that's telling me that we are in business. The steering is pretty smooth, so I just have to make it so, I think. That's kind of the thing. You know? All right, the steering's actually really smooth, so I guess that just means it's time to make it so. Now, having had this in 100 bajillion times, I guess you could weld all your joints, but you don't want to weld that on. If you weld everything in, I think you'd have to take the steering box out to take everything apart. And then what are you going to do when you take it apart anyway? You're making a new one if it doesn't work. So I'm gonna stick with this method. We'll tighten everything down, take 5, and see if we got anything left today. Guys, I'm gonna leave it right there. I'm beat. So I feel like drilling holes through this bracket and through the frame is going to just not go well. And I don't want to screw that up. So we've still achieved the step that I was hoping to achieve. At this point, our steering wheel is connected through our steering shafts to our steering box to our wheels. So gang, thanks for watching Between the Sharks. We are working down the punch list on this vehicle. Front suspension's mocked up, steering is mocked up, engine and transmission are mocked up, rear end is mocked up, rear suspension is mocked up, gas tank is placed on there. So we have got to continue on that path. And for us, that means things like brakes need to get mocked up, exhaust needs to get mocked up, wiring eventually, which is kind of crazy. That's kind of neat. And then I think most of our systems are kind of mocked up outside of wiring and gauges and the such. But we've got a few phases on finishing assembly on the engine to, you know, warrant all that, because a lot of that will be attached to the motor. But the steering, gang, was a painful step. But I think this is as elegant as a solution as I could have ever expected. So good luck on your projects out there. If you're out there at home and you're building one of these, you know darn well that the majority of the projects are like this. They're completely unglamorous. They whoop your butt. They make you feel dumb. But there's a huge sense of relief when they actually work. Not everything is like mocking up a body or chopping a top or, you know, getting the stance just right. Sometimes you just gotta fight stuff like this to make stuff like this fit in stuff like this. And that's the majority of what building a hot rod is. And I appreciate you watching and joining along and rooting me on and all that jazz. And if you're working on your own at home, this is me rooting you on. You got this. Stick with it. Stick with it. All right. We'll see you next time on Between the Sharks.